Good evening and welcome to the Gold Coats and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name is Tom Luongo. It's Friday. It's March 15th, 2019. Sorry about that. When you work from home, every day feels the same. 2 days before St. Patrick's Day and all sorts of potential, weirdness on the Irish border. We'll see. I don't know. I've been talking an awful lot about Brexit, but we've got a lot to talk about tonight. Before we start, housekeeping. Monday nights at 8 o'clock. Friday nights at 8:30, roughly. Coffee wasn't ready by 8:30 tonight, so I'm a couple of minutes late. I also decided to shave and make myself presentable for y'all. So, alrighty then. Thank you very much, Stoyanovich, for my for the feedback on the article I wrote at my blog at tomluongo.me today called Italy is Courting China is a Masterstroke of Chaos. And we're going to talk to you. We're going to talk about that tonight a little bit. What's going on with Italy wanting to court China for their Belt and Road Initiative. But I actually want to give you a preview of what I've got coming up for my gig over at Money and Markets on Monday. What's interesting about what's going on in Central Asia, and Central Asia is a huge theme that we cover every month in the Gold Goats and Guns newsletter, by the way, and how to deal with and how to parse the nuances of U.S. foreign policy, which at this point are very, very confused, other than the fact that we're just desperate to hold on to the empire. If you understand that very basic point, everything we're doing makes perfect sense. So good evening to everybody who's shown up so far. I hope everybody's having a great day. Even those of us who are with us tonight that I know are having a tough time right now. Not going to name names. So, best goes out to all of you and anybody who decides to listen to this later on. All right, so let's get started by talking about President Rouhani of Iran going to Iraq this week. Now, back in December, let's set the Wayback Machine for December, somewhere around Christmas. I don't know what you guys were doing at Christmas, but I was playing a lot of board games. Yeah, that's what I was doing at Christmas. And writing the newsletter and doing what I always do. And the Chinaman is not the issue, dude. Of course it's not. So, we set our Wayback Machine to Christmas, and the government shutdown is in place. Trump, with nothing to do on a Christmas Eve, sends himself off to Iraq to meet with the new Iraqi prime minister, who, by the way, is not our puppet. The Iraqi elections a month earlier had installed a, dare I say, U.S. skeptic government, as opposed to a Eurosceptic government. We'll call it an Ameriskeptic government. There, that's a far better term than U.S. skeptic. Ameriskeptic government. One that's far closer to Iran now than the previous one. And so Trump goes over there to meet with the Iraqi prime minister, but he does so in secret, in the dark, late at night, and from our base, and demands, for security reasons, that the prime minister of Iraq, in Iraq, come to him at an American base in Iraq. Now, this is quite the insult. The meeting never goes off. Trump goes home after having reviewed the troops, hat in hand. Fast forward to 3 months later. This week, President Rouhani of Iran shows up in Iraq to a hero's welcome. IRGC leader in general, Qasem Soleimani, hope I'm pronouncing his name right, and if I get it wrong, well, I'm an American, shows up and ensures that Iraq stands ready to ignore the U.S. on sanctions for continuing to trade with Iran. The Iraqi government is now split, according to Elijah Magnier, into two camps. Ones that want the U.S. to draw down its military presence in Iraq, and one that wants them to leave completely. So, does this bode well for American engagement and continued American presence in Central Asia? No. What is it going to do for Trump's supposed pullout from Syria, where we're going to just leave advisors in place who are going to act as air spotters for airstrikes? Well, the rest of the support troops and ground troops all get relocated to Iraq. What does this do to the Saudi Arabians investing $10 billion in an oil refinery at the Port of Gwadar in Baluchistan, Pakistan? A lot. When you're looking at a situation where a dominant power is losing its ability to control its quote-unquote puppets and or satraps, good evening, Thordium, everything begins to change, even though the major players refuse to admit it. They just go about their business every day saying the same thing. Mike Pompeo's out there today berating Congress, saying that they don't have the Yemeni's best people at heart, the Yemeni's people best interests at heart, because both of our houses stood up and said, get us out of the Saudis' war in Yemen. The point of Rouhani's visit now is, as MG Stoyanovich just refines this, is that Iraq will become the Iranian sanctions busting pipeline. They will increase trade from around $12 billion a year to $20. They will pay for Iranian gas and electricity, sorely needed by the Iraqis, in dollars, with dollars that they get for selling oil. Now, even India is not going to do that. Even India is not going to be so brazen. Now, this is from an occupied country. An occupied country is going to trade with the quote-unquote most hated country in the world, quote Jeremy Clarkson, using dollars that it gets in its oil trade against the wishes of the United States, who's actively trying to cut Iran off from all dollar trade around the world. Now, even India is not willing to do that, but India is going to absolutely flaunt U.S. sanctions on both Venezuela and Iran by trading for Venezuelan and Iranian oil and gas in local currencies, which is what they did during the last round of sanctions before the JCPOA was signed. Remember, India back then paid for Iranian oil in rupees, soybeans, washing machines, Tatas, cars, and everything else that they can come up with, mung beans, whatever. Because at the end of the day, Bryce, trade is trade. So that's what we're looking at. So Rouhani's visit to Iraq this week is very, very telling. And no matter how much John Bolton continues to try and poke at various open wounds around the world, try and keep North Korea and South Korea at arm's length, trying to poke the Russians into a provocation in Ukraine, and or just flat out send troops to Ukraine, or scuttle or force the Serbs to vote down the agreement between them and Kosovo. I was reading today. I don't know all about this, and any of you who are Serbian can fill me in the chat, but just a little bit to note that apparently Kosovo introduced, put forth legislation that was an agreement between the two countries, which was not what was originally agreed upon, with an obvious U.S. hand to scuttle that agreement. I was reading that over at Fort Russ this morning, trying to get up to speed on what's going on in Serbia, because I'm woefully behind the times. As Stoyanovich puts a little bit more color on the situation between Iran and Iraq, Iran will place orders and Iraq will buy and resell. Iran will provide manpower and rebuilding supplies. Iraq is buying Russian weapons as well. Yes, they are. Then all of that will get funneled into Syria. So we have Iran and Iraq in cahoots now. The U.S. has got no bases other than in Jordan, you know, relevant to the area, in Jordan and Qatar. And they're losing control over the Turks as well. The Turks haven't kicked us out of Incirlik yet, but when is that going to happen? So what comes next is we keep hearing noise coming out of Afghanistan. As I jump around a little bit here, but let's just kind of paint a picture of all of it. We paint a picture of Afghanistan now. The Taliban and the Americans are supposedly somewhat in agreement on a troop withdrawal and how to move forward. Now, I don't know how much stock I put in this, but I can tell you that it's far closer to being reality than it isn't, because at the end of the day, everybody in the region is moving away from what the U.S. wants and what the U.S. is willing and is unwilling to put up with what the U.S. wants anymore. Pakistan, India, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Afghanistan, obviously the Azerbaijan, even to a greater or lesser extent. So their worst nightmare, as Thornum just reminds us, is that the Shia Crescent, which has been the full and utter focus of the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia for years, the Shia Crescent is now complete. They failed to topple Assad. We have two tenuous holdouts areas in Syria at Al-Tanf and east of the Euphrates, down in the southeast. And it is, and we're losing our position in Iraq unless we turn around and just, after we're disinvited to stay in Iraq by the Iraqi government, that we just stay anyway. At which point we'll be in violation of every international law at that point. We're already in violation of international law and the UN Charter and everything else in Syria. Why do you think John Bolton wants to get us out of every treaty we've ever signed? So, given the situation, you can see with Trump's new budget that Trump is trying to realign the way we spend money in Washington. And he wants it all spent here on building more weapons and fewer entitlements and less enforcement of things that have gotten out of control. Things like education and the EPA and all of that stuff, which have radically exceeded their original mandate, become very EU-like in their bureaucratic ability to shut down commerce, trade, and activity that we don't like, that they don't want. So it's very interesting to see how that's playing out. If you just look at like the general theme of Trump's budget, get rid of all the shit that's making American labor too expensive. And if the government is going to run a deficit, it might as well run a deficit building weapons and on the military here at home. And that's what he's doing. It is sickening, but you can see that there's a certain perverse logic to it that's consistent with everything Trump has ever said. North on 60. Just putting it out there. I'm not saying I agree with it, because I certainly don't. I agree with the first half, but I don't agree with the second half. But I mean, I love the idea of cutting the EPA's budget by 38% and Department of Education by 20% and Department of Energy by 15%. I'm all over all that stuff. Hey, let's cut the military budget by 30% and let's really go all out. Because that's what we need to do. Because if we're going to diffuse the entitlement and pension time bomb that is staring the United States in the face over the next 5 to 10 years, what better way to do that than to cut spending and reverse the issuance of debt? Unfortunately, Trump is a moron who made all of his money on lower interest rate sensitive real estate, large production projects, none of which would have been financed during his lifetime if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve. So, just fascinating to see how that's playing out. And then, of course, who have I not mentioned so far? The two most important players in the region, China and Russia. And the Chinese probably were the ones. You see, you got to remember here, the Saudis are in a very dangerous situation. They're running a massive budget deficit. They need $70 to $80, $90 a barrel oil in order to balance their budget. But they're also locked in because of this alliance with Trump. They're locked into using the dollar for all their oil trade, even though that's killing them. And they really need to free float the real, but they can't, or accept yuan or any other payment, any other form of payment. But they can't because Trump won't let them. So what's MBS doing going to Pakistan to, save Pakistan with a whole bunch of money, as Alistair Crook put it last month, fairy godmother-like or fairy godfather-like. Here's billions of dollars to plug the holes in your current account deficit. And we're going to build a $10 billion refinery in Gwadar, which is the cornerstone to China's strategy in Pakistan, which they're spending, something close to $60 billion upgrading the infrastructure in Pakistan. From gas pipelines to power plants to roads to rail to ports, the whole 9 yards, right? China's spending this money for one reason alone, to be able to get their goods from Shanghai to the port of Gwadar outside of the Straits of Malacca so they can send them around the rest of the world. And there's the Saudis wanting to put an oil refinery right there. To turn Gwadar into a refining hub, which is right down the road, by the way, from Iran. It's not that far away. It's only 150 miles from the port of Chabahar. I mean, it's closer than Houston to New Orleans, for Christ's sake. So, no, Rocket Man, no, it's not that they're forming a... So, at the end of the day, so what's happening here is that Pakistan, so remember that Saudi Arabia has always been a kind of a proxy power within Pakistan through the Pakistani military. So this was their way of getting the civilian government back on their side, because Imran Khan is trying to not rest, but he's trying to bring together the civilian and military governments effectively in Pakistan under one rubric for the first time ever. If he's successful, it'll change everything about Central Asia, South Central Asia. It'll change everything if he's successful. So the Saudis have already begun to panic, and so did Bolton. And they're like, no, get in there. Otherwise, India and Pakistan will make up. So we need to blow up some Indians in Kashmir. And you got to get in there and keep the Pakistanis from falling completely into China's orbit. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Khan's not stupid. He's going to take the Saudis' money, and he's going to continue to take Chinese money as well. And he's going to play both of them against each other. Meanwhile, shoring up his relationship with his closest neighbors, India, as best he can, India, Afghanistan, and Iran. Which is what he needs to do. Could we one day see an alliance, a diplomatic alliance between Saudi Arabia and Iran? No. Absolutely not. Saudi Arabians actively spend money to destabilize the Iranian government. They are the main mechanism by which Sunni terrorism exists in Iran. That's not going to happen. It's exactly the opposite of that. So what's going to happen here is, if at best it'll just wind up being détente. What the Saudis realize is that if they do not keep the major players in the region, which is not the United States, happy, it's Russia and China. And that's why King Salman offered Putin that OPEC Plus deal, which Putin turned down, making Saudi Arabia and Russia kind of pigs more equal to the rest of them within OPEC. Russia, of course, turned that down, knowing full well that it would piss Iran and many others off, Qatar, and well, not Qatar, and others off. Try and hold the cartel together. And everywhere and in every meeting between every head of state, from London to Tokyo at this point, is about the Russians. The Russians are present at every meeting because Russian energy is sitting in the background of every one of these meetings. Or Russian military strength, or Russian military weapons, or Russian diplomacy. And so everywhere you look, there's the specter of Russia with China behind them, backing them, coloring every meeting. So when Rouhani goes to Iraq, Russia's there in spirit. Because everybody knows that a favorable outcome from that meeting will be smiled upon by the Russians and supported in other ways by Russian diplomacy, the Russian or Russian military or whatever. And so you can see how that's playing itself out. Russian money. And everybody's winning. And all the U.S. can do is sanction, threaten, cajole, invade, and bomb. Trump has shown no interest whatsoever in offering up carrots that are meaningful to anyone. He has a victim's mentality that we are the victims of the world. And he wants recompense. Well, I got news for you. Hate to say it, but the slaves never got reparations for slavery. All around the world. They got freed. And they were happy about that. Maybe it's, many places around the world, most places around the world, it was done with some form of recompense for that generation. And that was it. And it was over. And then they moved on with their lives. But Trump is acting like every dollar that ever flowed out of the United States that he didn't agree with needs to be paid for. Needs to be paid back. He's not going to get it. And he refuses to get his own house in order, so it's sad. It's beyond sad, but it is what's happening. And I love the idea of that, of Russia being that specter kind of haunting pretty much every meeting. So there it is. You guys have been killing it on comments and questions, and I've been ignoring most of it. For those of you who watch this afterwards, as much listen to me as read the chat, because I have the best audience on the internet, without a doubt. We have people on this live stream that could do this live stream, and they deserve as much of a bow as everybody else. So let's open it up. We're going to open it up for comments, questions, everything else. I don't know how long I'm going to go tonight. I didn't really have a whole lot of remarks prepared, so we'll see how this works out. All right. Alexander Kalish has killed it earlier in the evening. Anyone who tries to control the world will go broke, as we are proving. We have destroyed Iraq, and nobody wants us there. You're absolutely right, Alex. I agree completely. We're at that point where we have gone broke doing this. Tulsi Gabbard is the only one actually making any kind of noise about the cost, the unbelievable cost of all of these wars, of all of these occupations and everything else, and how we don't really get to see the benefit of it anymore. She's, sounds remarkably like Donald Trump did 3 years ago, and now he's just spending money like a fucking drunken sailor. Sorry, he's spending money in such a way that he makes drunken sailors look embarrassed. And she needs our support in every way at this point. She's the only one worth a shit running for president. I think he cut Medicare as well, Liberty Cat. I'm sure he cut something, but I don't remember. I didn't look at all of it. I mean, I remember looking through. You may not be. I may not have covered everything. I'm sorry, but, you know, there it is. Stoyanovich reminds us that Iraq is being carved up right underneath our nose. Iran will control the Shiite Arabs and perhaps the Kurds. The Turks will control the rest, and those not under either will be on their own. We'll see. You know, ultimately, I think, though, that Iran and Turkey will probably should work at this point in such a way as to make sure that Iraq is relatively stable, that all the regionalization of Iraq will remain reasonably politically stable. I think that's what's going. That's probably the other undercurrent to Rouhani's meeting. I don't remember if Erdogan, if anybody can remind me if Erdogan's has visited Iraq recently or not. I don't remember if they've met recently, because if so, then I'm sure that has been part of the talks, because again, Rouhani and Erdogan meet all the time in Astana to discuss Syria, so Iraq is going to be a part of those discussions. Don't let anybody kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. So Alexander Cleese again, how about cutting everything by 75% as opposed to just, you know, the measly 28 to 30% that Trump was trying to cut everything else? You know, you cut everything else by 75%, you dump Medicare, and we are fine. Well, yes and no. I mean, our budget, we would have a lot to do to cut our budget to get it in line, but we remember we're also staring at higher interest rates in the future, which is going to eat up an even greater portion of the budget as it stands, as it's currently constituted right now. So you would have to cut the budget by probably at least 25 to 30% in order to be able to allow the Fed to normalize interest rates, and keep the country, the country's finances from completely imploding. Trump is not going to grow his way out of this, not after an 11-year expansion. And it's a shitty expansion as well. Let's see. Oh God, you guys are killing it. I lost some of the comments. So Thordoom says, that reminds me that look at Australia. Now that Russia's made it safe for China to help Venezuela, they jumped in and offered to fix their electricity system. Russia's always in front to take the heat while China comes in from behind. That's exactly what's going on. Don't let anybody kid you. We were involved in the taking down of the Venezuelan electricity grid. Trump is enabling all this north on 60. He is, and it is delusional. So Stoyanovich says, I think I peed a little while laughing at his NATO payment proposal. Russia is assembling a giant collective of cooperative nations. He is. And I think I actually laughed out loud as well when I saw that. I aside from going, then I started laughing because it's so ridiculous. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, of course, that Trump is now putting his big ask on the table that he wants, like, minimum cost plus 50 for whatever it costs us to maintain troops in Germany and Japan, and they're not going to pay that shit. Go fuck off. They're basically going to say, no, I think we just need to get rid of NATO, which would be Trump's way of implementing John Bolton's desire. But John Bolton, NATO is the only thing that only treaty John Bolton wants us to keep, because it's the one that binds everybody to us. So North on 60 says very kindly, Tom, you speak truth at a time when it's not coming from anywhere else. That's not completely true. There are plenty of other people speaking unbelievable amounts of truth, but I appreciate the sentiment. You may not be religious, but I am, and God bless you. Well, everybody has a religion. So may the force be with me, right? You knew it was coming. Come on. All right. So Multiplex reminds us that he is as well more than impressed with Gabbard. You have to be very impressed with Tulsi Gabbard. She's absolutely killing it right now. And I think from the response that I'm getting, my little corner of YouTube, she's got a lot more traction than people think that she does. And the same kind of rabid love for Tulsi Gabbard exists right now in the same way that it did in the early days of 2008 with Ron Paul. So Rocket Man says, well, I'll cross over to Gabbard in the primary. I'm the only reason I haven't like registered Democrat yet in order to vote in the closed primary here in Florida is because I don't want to be inundated with bullshit from those people. Because the Republicans aren't going to send me shit this year because Trump, and then pull the lever again for Trump in 2020. Well, as of right now, I'm not pulling the lever for anybody. So we'll see. Because I'm going right back to where I was before. Don't vote. It only encourages them. Does the Iron/Golden Dome work well enough for self-defense and USA border? The Iron Dome is shit. That's why we're moving THAADs into Israel. Because the Iron Dome can't stop what Iran, Russia, and Hezbollah have. It's already been proven that it doesn't work. How long can, Dragon M asking, how long can adding debt go until there are consequences? Japan is 270% of GDP. The US is about 110% of GDP. It really is more about flow than stock at this point. It's about the flow of currencies, not really the stock of the debt itself. I mean, the numbers are insane, but you also have to look at it in relation to global liquidity numbers. I'm not saying that it's not bad. It is. It's terrible. But you have to ask yourself, it's more about flow than stock. And right now, things are still flowing. And this is why I keep saying over and over again that Trump is going to fold on his trade war with China, because everything he's doing right now is killing flow of dollars. It's causing people to want to hold on to dollars and dry up liquidity and stop the flow of dollars around the world. And it's the flow of dollars that then impacts the stock of dollars, the stock of dollar liabilities. There's plenty of dollars floating around, which the Fed can create, and the Treasury, at the rate that the Treasury is spending money, there's plenty of dollars floating around to keep the world liquefied to pay off the existing stock of debt. But the minute people start getting worried, and the minute the flow of dollars dries up, that's when the stock of debt explodes and everything crashes, and everything can literally crash overnight. I mean, Gabbard is absolutely. So Standard Dev is reminding us that unfortunately she's still very much a lefty, advocating many of the failed same policies, tax and spend, gun control, the rest of it. Look, at the end of the day, Gabbard's a Democrat, and she's a Democrat from Hawaii. And you pretty much have to be a full-blown shitlib in order to get elected in Hawaii, at least publicly. What's important is that Tulsi Gabbard understands that the lifeblood of the empire is overseas commitments, right? That the empire is the lifeblood of the swamp. It is what refills the swamp every day. Okay? She understands that at a fundamental level. And she's willing, when you actually sit down and talk to her about crafting policy and about her first reactions to policy. And again, remind people to go back and watch her interview with Joe Rogan, where she had every opportunity to come out with shitlib sound bites about every issue, because he handed them to her on a silver freaking platter. He threw big old freaking softballs right over the freaking plate, and she refused to take the bait multiple times. Watch it. It's very impressive. Regardless of the Brexit outcome, Germany wins. Britain stops being a political impediment in the EU. Leave means loss of money, which makes Germany cringe right now. So, yes and no. The Brexit outcome can still be, leave will mean a loss of money, which will really hurt Germany. Germany is in no position right now to lose the British tax cow. One person described it brilliantly. I was watching, I watched so much stuff on Brexit this week, that the whole point of Theresa May's exit agreement on Brexit is to turn the UK into an unending tax cow for the EU, to be milked until they are bled completely white. They are nothing more than a cash cow without any ability to complain while they're being drained. Mark Bogosian says, hey, look, we've not had real economic growth in 11 years. We used to call that a depression. I agree. But from a nominal GDP perspective, this is the longest expansion in history. It's the shittiest expansion in history, but it's the longest. And therefore, you really can't expect to get any more out of this than we've had. This is literally, this is 2002. And we're Japan. Circa 1992. U.S. spec ops blew up the grid in Venezuela. They absolutely did. I read something yesterday or the day before, said that a guy there's a merc who finally came forward and said, yeah, they were willing to pay me to blow up, the electrical grid in Iran. And I said no. Yeah, I'd be yeah. And so if Germany wants to declare independence, the best thing they can do right now is to do exactly what James is telling us. Kick NATO out, sell the property, balance the budget. I agree with Tulsi Gabbard on foreign policy as well. I depart company with her on most every other issue as well. But foreign policy is more important than all the other policies put together. You have to understand that 90% of the shit that we complain about, we cover on this podcast and this live stream twice a week, every week. It is the empire. The other stuff can all be dealt with politically. If we're not spending over $1 trillion fucking a year on this shit. There's the Defense Department budget, and then there's the other discretionary spending. We already spend over $1 trillion a year on this stuff. But she is not worthwhile and everything. I don't want her to be president. I want her as the Democratic nominee to push Trump back into a mode where he has to fire John Bolton. What's the future? Wicked Guru asks the big question. What's the future look like between Israel, Syria, and Iran? Iran and Syria and Hezbollah and Russia will put Israel in its place. And the question's going to come down the pike at some point when there's an true existential threat to Israel's well-being. Meaning, if Trump is removed from office, Israel's going to lose their backstop. At that point, the Israelis will have to sue for peace. And then Putin and Russia will hold everybody else at bay. And the Jews will have to get over themselves. Tiffany Trump is in Belgrade and expected to stay another week, which I find really odd. Bet Trump sent a note with her. Yeah, I'll bet you. Reckless Abandon, Brett Harris, the great Brett Harris is here tonight, is in the house tonight, reminding us that Deripaska, I saw this right before I came on. Oleg Deripaska, the owner of Rusal and one of the Russian, basically the Russian aluminum magnate, is suing the U.S. Treasury Department for putting sanctions on him last year without justification. He should absolutely do so. Absolutely do so. And that's a big deal. That has a Browder angle on it that I don't really want to get into tonight. Tulsi Gabbard reminds us, Thurden reminds us that Tulsi Gabbard even tweeted about the false flag about the burning humanitarian aid and called out Pompeo and Bolton as liars. This is big stuff. Standard Dev asks if an independent can vote in a Democratic primary. If you have open primaries. If you live in a closed primary state, no, you have to register by being a member, and you have to be a member of the party. And you have to check the, and every state's going to have different rules on this, so you're going to have to register before a certain date. Some states it's day of, other states it's, or a week of or whatever. Other states it's anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So, get on that shit. So the U.S. and Canada and the EU put more sanctions on Russia for the Kerch Strait incident. Yeah, and the Russians are going to respond appropriately. You watch, they will. They always do. I'm not worried. I'm not worried about it. Neither are they. Yeah, I mean, dude, Rocket Man, you're in Oklahoma. I'm surprised you don't have to register Democrat like 2 years ago to switch parties, because pretty much if you're not a Republican, you're not allowed on a fucking ballot in that state. Jesus, they have the most onerous ballot access laws in the country. Okay, you literally have to, for a third party to get on the ballot, unless they've changed the rules in the last few years, you have to have your signatures in for any fucking like state election, or like a year before the, like 9 months before the election. It's like literally the longest period of time that the Supreme Court has allowed it to be constitutional. It's retarded. And you still have to pay money. It's insane. Yeah, the Israeli rhetoric is bad. Something is going to happen. The U.S. is putting THAADs in Israel. I fully expect the Israelis to launch an attack if necessary to save Netanyahu's political career, because if not, he's going to jail. Yeah, check on Nevada. They have, usually Nevada, I think, has very lax ballot access laws. So it shouldn't be very, they have completely corrupt political parties, mind you. So they may not count your vote, but you know. Unfortunately, the Democrats will rig it all with the superdelegates. So I don't know how much traction we'll have within the party. Another reason to vote for Gabbard. She's the one who resigned over the superdelegate situation in relation to rigging the election for Hillary against Bernie Sanders, which she felt was completely and utterly beyond the pale. The one amusing thing to a Pence presidency would be the meltdowns from the drag queens across the nation. You mean all 6 of them? Yeah, I do think you're right, Liberty Cat, that Wisconsin has open primaries. Russian Foreign Ministry, we express our regret that the American-Canadian capitals, that they continue to pursue a disastrous course towards the complete destruction of bilateral relations with Rus. I know. But that's the state of affairs. That's the state of play, and it's not going to change for as long as the swamp holds sway in Washington. Yeah, sanctions are causing Stoyanovich reminds us, sanctions are causing the Russian economy to become more efficient and increase. It's expected to surpass Germany in a year or two. That would be in terms of purchasing power GDP, not in terms of raw GDP. So when you hear some fucking neocon say, why do we give a shit about Russia? They only have GDP the size of Canada. Remind them that in purchasing power parity, which is the only statistic that makes GDP even remotely worthwhile, because it's not the amount of spending you have in your own currency. It's how that translates across countries in local currency. So comparing the Russian economy to the US economy in dollars is stupid, since they don't use dollars to pay for stuff in Russia. They use rubles. And from a ruble perspective, and normalizing the purchasing power of a dollar locally versus the purchasing power of a ruble locally, Russia's GDP is nearly on par with Germany's. And I think that's on an aggregate level, and on a per capita level, I think it surpasses Germany's. No, it does not on a per capita level. Yeah, you and me both, user 13. She'd break out the popcorn for the BB perp walk. Oh, dude, I'd have that shit on infinite repeat on this live stream. I would just like leave it open, like on infinite live stream with I don't know, like Frank Zappa's "He's So Gay" playing in the background the entire time. I think that would be awesome. If BB is perp walked, I promise to do a video of that set to the tune of Frank Zappa's "He's So Gay." It'll get banned off of YouTube so goddamn fast your head will spin, but it'll be awesome and it'll be worth it. So I'll have to put it up on BitChute as well. All right. Okay, so Rocket Man informs me that the Oklahoma ballot access laws are, I haven't looked in years because I'm not invested in that side of politics anymore. But he reminds us that Oklahoma's ballot access laws aren't as bad as they used to be, because it actually allowed LP and Gary Johnson to get on the ballot. So So John Fordham asks us, how can Trump fire Bolton? He first has to fire his own son-in-law. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Yeah, so you guys like the idea of BB Perpwalk and He's So Gay? Have you ever listened to Zappa's He's So Gay? Because if you haven't, oh my. Let's just remind you that it's a song, and this is definitely NSFW, that has the brilliant couplet of, well, his evening's not complete without some meat in the seat. I can't even say it without laughing. Yeah. Just have to remind you all that no one could make me laugh better than Frank Zappa. Maybe George Carlin, but to this day, Zappa's, God damn, that man was funny. Well, his evening's not complete without some meat in the seat. Oh, it's brilliant. No, I'm Too Sexy doesn't come close to He's So Gay. Oh my God. Oh wow, fairies on a string for you, and just a little later. Until you guys literally have not like plumbed the depths of musical hell until you've listened to Thingfish. If you've never listened to Frank Zappa's Thingfish, which is, by God, one of the most profane things I've absolutely ever heard in my life. And to this day, I mean, we used to listen to it all the time. That now Camille and I just quote it to each other all the time, and our daughter looks at us like we're not well. I must tell you that, but I can't even play it for her anymore. Thingfish is really great. It's really insane, because it's a Broadway musical. And it makes the Book of Mormon look positively like, I don't know, like a Mormon revival. So Titties and Beer is a great song, but He's So Gay. I mean, there's Broken Hearts for Assholes, and Jewish Princess, which I'm not going to repeat here, or I mean, so many things. I mean, but yeah, He's So Gay is from Thingfish, and it's really good. And the live version from does humor belong in music? Yeah, Catholic Girls is really good too. Oh no. Actually, for you Europeans in the audience, I should really cut together like a whole Yellow Vest thing set to the tune In France off of Us and Them, or Them or Us. Is it the album's Them or Us with the song In France? Dude. They got some mystery blowjob. Turn your beat of green down in France. Dum, 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 dum. We're down in France. Oh, God, so funny. Oh, my God. One Adam 12. Oh, approach with caution. All right. Yeah, I mean, if you guys have not listened to, like, I mean, I can sit there and do like the last 12 minutes of Frank Zappa alone. If you guys have never listened to You Are What You Is, right? One of the greatest albums ever recorded, from Charlie's Enormous Mouth to the Coneheads to the title track, Suicide Chump. Oh, God. I Don't Want to Get Drafted. Oh, my, Drafted Again. That's the name of the song. That whole album from beginning to end is chock full of so much musical sarcasm. Yeah, I mean, Bret Harris, I really didn't think you were alive in 1885. I mean, if you do, you look good. I mean, 190 years old? You look great. But yeah, well, that's actually the concert I'm talking about. Is the 1985 New Year's Eve where they played it live on MTV. That was the last time anything ever went out live without a delay on MTV, because that concert went out live. And yeah. And that album and that concert was enshrined as Does Humor Belong in Music? It's it's a concert video. You can find it around, and it's really, really great. You Are What You Is. Oh, what an album from beginning to end. I mean, he rags on everybody. He rags on almost every genre of music I mean, every genre of music. I mean, there's a flat out freaking Journey song that he just like crushes it on. I mean, once you know what he's doing sarcastically with the music, you're like, oh my God, it's so good. And the whole thing is just like one big, one from one song to the next, directly into the next. And the whole thing just runs. And it's just this, and then the second half of the album starts with the title track and just goes from beginning to end. And is just literally one great song after another. Heavenly Bank Account, Dumb All Over, which is the proto rap, which is him speaking into a microphone and ragging on everything. And, it's just brilliant. Am I playing guitar for you guys tonight? No. MTV used to be interesting. The police trying to beat up Sting, Billy Idol drunk and talking about stuff, that would be banned today. Oh my God, it would all be banned. I mean, so yeah. No, the Zappa was amazing. And I mean, just amazing. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of later Zappa. I'm not a huge fan of the early Mother's Invention stuff. It's okay, but it really doesn't speak to me. I'm an 80s child. I really like the really complex stuff, starting with like Shake Your Booty. And that's the stuff that, like You Are What You Is, Shake Your Booty, Them or Us, The Yellow Shark, Broadway the Hard Way. Unbelievable freaking album. Broadway the Hard Way. Why Does It Hurt When I Pee? That stuff is great. Don't You Eat That Yellow Snow, obviously. Titties and Beer and Dynamo Hum. Like live versions of Dynamo Hum are just the funniest goddamn thing you've ever heard. Dynamo hum, where's that dynamo coming from? I got a $20 bill, says she can't. Oh God. Great stuff. So yep, there's Rocket Man trying to push us back to politics, and I'm like, dude, it's 53 minutes in and I'm done. I'm just like marking time here. Let's see. Yeah, it just, if you want to know why I am the way I am, I started reading Philip K. Dick when I was 13, and I started listening to Rush at 16 and Frank Zappa at 18. I got introduced to Kafka at 19, and my life was over. At that point, I was like, all right, whatever. And then I learned I heard Heisenberg's uncertainty principle at 21, and I put the whole thing together and went, yeah, the world's fucked, and I don't believe a word of it. But yeah, once you've kind of internalized some of the really great Philip K. Dick at like 15, and for me it was things like, yeah, I mean, and let's not kid yourself, right? Favorite movies growing up other than Star Wars, Blade Runner, Brazil. I can't tell you how many times I've watched Terry Gilliam's Brazil. I think I'm one of 20 Americans who saw it in the theaters. I need to go back and watch 12 Monkeys. I haven't watched that movie in forever. Speaking of great movies. Speaking of great Terry Gilliam movies. Holy shit. Why don't I own a copy of 12 Monkeys? Yeah, I'm very Gen X, dude. I mean, I'm like prototypical Gen X, right? Like, you want a picture of Gen X? There you go. All right. There it is. I'll give you my smug face. All right. All right. What do we got? 54 minutes. Anything else? Keep It Greasy is really hard. Obviously, The Black Page, obviously, and so many others. But it's, yeah. Am I a Les Claypool fan? Oh, yeah. No, Les Claypool's amazing. I can't play like him at all. I'm not a huge Primus fan. I mean, I own a lot of their stuff, but I like on the early albums. I mean, I've seen Primus live. They opened for Rush on the Roll the Bones tour, and I actually barely even knew who they were. I kind of knew who they were because I had a roommate who was heavily into Primus. But I like specific tracks off the early albums. I like the Brown album, and I like Anti-Pop. I have a real problem with Primus, and I really like Herb Alexander, the original drummer, a lot. I think he's phenomenal. He's amazing. But their songwriting really improved on the last two albums with the Brain as the drummer, and he's not nearly. He's like Alan White to Herb's Bill Bruford, and making a Yes analogy here. But Les Claypool's amazing. I mean, just ridiculously cool. You know, anybody who can slap a friggin' fretless and fill space like he does in a power trio where the friggin' guitar player isn't playing any fucking chords. Life of Brian, I've seen it 25, 30 times. Easy. Love it. It's a great movie. Can I please post a playlist somewhere of what, like my favorite songs or favorite albums or something like that, or just like, I mean, I did my rundown of the Rush albums in order and took 37 minutes to do it. Who else does this shit other than me? Because like, and I've been prepping that friggin' thing for like 15 years. But I do love Les Claypool, and but most of the music he creates, I can't listen to. It's like, there's something about most of, like, I love Tommy the Cat and Jerry was a race car driver. Well, known as Big Brown Beaver is one of the fucking greatest songs ever written or recorded. It's really, really good. Most of Andy Pop I really, really like. What's that? The Golden Boy from the Brown album is fucking retarded. It's got one of the greatest riffs of all time. I'm not a huge Ween fan. The only Ween album I own is 12 Golden Country Greats, because that's a fucking phenomenal album. I mean, seriously phenomenal album. If you've not listened to Ween's country album, where they got all the best players in Nashville to play on their album, it's otherworldly how good it is. We listen to it all the time. That's one of my Desert Island albums, to be honest with you. Ween's 12 Golden Country Greats, probably Frank Zappa's You Are What You Is. On any given day, like any 3 Rush albums. So but yeah, no, I mean, we can sit here and talk bass players for a while. Like, you know, guess who my favorite bass players are? Well, obviously Geddy Lee. I'm a big Les Claypool fan, but I can't play like him. The guys that I think who would be next? It would be Tony Levin, because Tony Levin is everything I want a bass player to be. I want a guy who can literally kill it and take the instrument and rip it one end to down, up one side and down the other, and then not do so. Tony Levin is the very definition of the meek bass player. In the classic definition of the word meek, and that the meek shall inherit the earth. The meek does not, that phrase classically does not mean the shrinking violet will, the pacifist will inherit the earth. No, meek means the man who has weapons and knows when to keep them sheathed. That's Tony Levin on the bass. Notes above the staff or somebody else's fucking job. My job is to hold down the lower end and be interesting and fantastic and play as few notes as possible and get as much power out of them as possible. And that's Tony Levin. Man can drop one note in the middle of, at one point, and completely change the song. And to me, that's mastery. So, guess what Alex Lifeson's real name is? Alex Zinovievich or whatever. Yes, I know Alex's real name. He's Polish. And Geddy is, I think he's Polish. He's either Polish or Serbian. And Geddy is a Polish Jew. The Geddy is Gary Leibowitz. Or Leibniz or something like that. Yeah. So I've met Tony Levin briefly before a Peter Gabriel concert when I was in high school. He was outside, you know, riding his bike around the Brendan Byrne Arena, just kind of getting rid of the nerves. He came over and spoke to us, and I didn't have anything to say. I was with my friend Pete, the drummer, who could talk to anybody, and I'm like Mr. Anxiety, like, oh my God, it's Tony Levin. Oh my God, it's cool. Like, and there's Pete just hanging out, chatting with him like he's nobody. I'm like, and because he is, but that guy Pete, amazing human being. One of my best friends from high school, I actually caught up with about 6 months ago for the first time since I guess I came home from college the first year. Hadn't seen Pete in 30 years. And we fell into a conversation that lasted 4 hours and was like, you know, we hadn't spent a minute apart from each other. It was fucking fantastic. Victor Wooten is very impressive. I can't play like him. I've seen Bela Fleck and the Flecktones probably half a dozen times. They used to play Florida like every 3 months. And he's tremendous. He is Serbian, that's what I thought. Son of Life. And yeah, I mean, he's there's a lot of guys in that realm, Jabba Soapbox, like Wooten, Stu Ham, there's a lot. I mean, I don't know anything. I don't know any of the new this generation bass players at all, because I stopped listening to new music about 15 years ago, so I don't really give a shit. But in that realm of dudes that, you know, they're incredibly impressive, but technically, but I can't listen to them. They're just not for me. I actually care more about drummers than I do bass players, to be honest with you. I'm more of a frustrated drummer, and the bass is just kind of the instrument I wound up playing because my parents would never allow me to have a drum set in the house. I think like a drummer. I don't really think like a bass player. So it is what it is. But I love, you know, but guys like that, I just sit there in awe of what they do. You know, in that realm of dudes that are phenomenally technically brilliant, and I love listening to them play, obviously Jaco Pastorius, and then probably the guy who would be his, you know, the guy who came after him who would be in that realm of player, and that would be Jeff Berlin, of the old Bruford band and whatnot. Jeff Berlin is unbelievable. Yeah, I don't think I'm missing anything. I don't like the Chili Peppers, so while I respectfully, I'm not a big fan, right? It's just not for me. It's just not my style of music. And a lot of bands I listen to, the bass player isn't, you know, that terribly impressive. I mean, look, I listen to a lot of Fairport Convention. I listen to a lot of Jethro Tull. I listen to a lot of at this stage of my life, I listen to a lot of I'm listening a lot on Mark Knopfler recently, like Knopfler solo work and whatnot. His bass player is really good, and the guy plays either fretless or stand up. He's really good. I don't know his name. I don't give a shit. I mean, so many great players out there, but the influential ones for me that really, you know, like kind of shaped, like, if I were to be a musician, what kind of musician would I have been had I taken a completely different path in my life? And honestly, the path I should have taken in my life. It would have been a mix of Tony Levin and Geddy Lee. And that's the way I play today. That's what I would have been. Huge Steve Gadd fan. The guy is an unbelievable player. John Entwistle. Yeah, the Ox was a great player. He was the first guy that I listened to when I was listening to, you know, when I first started listening to like real music, like Russian one. I listen to rock, and what I would consider today real music. From what the formative music for me, I started with Pink Floyd and moved to the Who and moved to Rush right after that. It was the Ox. I was like, God, this guy can fucking play. He's amazing, and he is, and he was. And I do love the Who. I think the Who is a tremendous influence and tremendous R&B band. Especially like that incredibly good period of the Who. That's Who's Next, Quadrophenia, Odds and Sods, and Who Are You? I'm not a huge fan of Tommy. I like, obviously, the big songs from that era, and I like a lot of the older stuff as well. But like the Who is really interesting in that most of their music, like, I can take or leave, but what they did well. And when they were like on, the Who were fucking amazing. Steve Smith is a great player, and one of those guys who you'd never know it by listening to Journey, and then he went off into the hinterlands and came back as an amazing jazzer. And you do know that Steve Smith was the last guy that Steve Smith and Peter Erskine were the last guys that Neil Peart took lessons from after Freddie Gruber died. Neil was still taking lessons from those guys up until, you know, Rush quit in 2014 or whatever. So, Stevie Ray Vaughan is always a go. Always a go. Really is. Jazz fusion players are technically great, but they shove in too many notes, overplaying. The guys who know when they'll lay back are powerful. I agree with you. Now, that said, Andy West of the Dixie Dregs did it right. So when you go back and listen to the Dixie Dregs, if you guys haven't listened to the Dixie Dregs, you should, because it's really the best stuff that Steve Morse ever did. Andy West plus Rod Morgenstein equals brilliance. So they were still young and hungry and everything else. And they shifted constantly. But listen to Andy West's work really carefully. Because what I really love about Andy West is, I was listening to him the other night, and is how he would shift so thoroughly from what he was playing from section to section to section, because the Dregs tunes would go all over the place. But West always seemed to be, always understood how to drive it and go crazy when they were all going crazy, and then, or when they weren't going crazy, he was, and then when they were going crazy, he was laying back, and he was like pushing and pulling the tempo and the time all over the place, and he was just brilliant. So Keith Moon, not going to say that. Can't say it. I love Keith Moon. He was interesting. He was good. Man had some amazingly good single strokes. But technically, but no. Vinnie Colaiuta. Vinny. You guys have not listened to Vinnie Colaiuta play? If you guys haven't listened to Joe Morello play, go back and listen to the old Dave Brubeck Quartet stuff with Joe Morello. Okay? Actually, do me a favor. If you like big band in any way, pick up the Burning for Buddy albums that Neil Peart produced back in the 90s. They're phenomenal. Where they got the Buddy Rich band to play, and then one drummer and a different drummer for each track that fit that arrangement to make up what Buddy Rich used to do himself all night long. And listen to some of those tracks. Listen to Dave Weckl on Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. Listen to Steve Gadd on Love for Sale. Listen to Steve Smith on Nutville. Yeah, he's on Nutville. Or listen to Joe Morello on either Take the A Train, which he does on volume 2, and Drum Morello on the other. And then listen to the drum solo in that and realize that the man is playing that bass drum fucking roll with one foot. Any guy that you see today playing double bass pedals, doing, I literally, and there's a making of video where Joe's playing that at 80 fucking years old, half blind from diabetes and everything else. He walks into that session, cuts that fucking solo, and they've got a camera on his foot, and he's doing triplet rolls on one fucking foot while playing other shit on top of it that was unreal. And then go back and listen to Bill Bruford play Willowcrest, which is unbelievable as well. So, wow, you saw Stevie Ray Vaughan the night he died? Favorite jazz musician was Thelonious Monk. I like all of it. I like quiet stuff. I like loud stuff. I have a very busy head, John Fordham. I really like busy music, but at the same time, I also like I appreciate good quiet music as well, but it's got to be really well played. And it's got to be well played because it's got to be well played by musicians who know how to play quiet. Like, one of the big problems I have, if you go back and watch the video I did on Rush, you'll hear me complain about Rush trying to write ballads or these quiet songs over and over and over again throughout their career, and they don't work. Why? Because these guys aren't any good at those arrangements. They're not good at writing that kind of stuff. They are a certain kind of musician that writes a certain kind of song. And I think Zappa was the same way. And, at a certain point, that's what they do, and they do really well. At least for the band, Zappa did that. And, so when you listen to quiet, jazz quartet stuff, it's a completely different world. So I really like, for example, Dave Brubeck and I've got a couple of old like Branford Marsalis albums that are really good as well. Well, I'm sorry, dude, I'm well past my time. I'm at 1 hour and 10 minutes, and you can leave. I don't do this for. I'm at that point now where I just do what I want to do, and people are responding, and we're gonna sit here and have a chat for a while. So that's what we're doing. Hey man, I'm nothing against using a double bass pedal. I just want you to know that there's Joe Morello at 85 years old doing the single stroke triplet roll with his fucking foot, and everybody in the audience watching that, because they all came in that day to watch Joe Morello play, right? And you have guys like Morgenstein and Neil Peart and others of that ilk all going, I think Joe's just doing this just to remind us. He's just doing this to remind us all, how much we have to learn yet. And best guitar solo, Sultans of Swing. It's one of the 5. It's really good. Good night, Rocket Man. Take care. I really do love the guitar solo in Sultans of Swing. I think Mark Knopfler is absolutely genius. Learning how to play the guitar, playing And you know, I've been learning how to play. When I sit down to learn new stuff on the guitar, I'm trying to play like Knopfler, because I don't have the facility to play fast in any way. What he does is really, really good, and how his command of the fretboard is quite impressive. And he really does understand his chords, his inversions, and all that stuff, and how to get the most out of those middle 4 strings on a guitar. He really does a tremendous. I didn't listen to a lot of Kate Bush. I tried. She didn't really do much for me. I bought a couple albums. Didn't really work for me. I like Peter Gabriel. There's an epic Joe Morello solo on YouTube somewhere from the 1960s. Yeah. Okay, cool. It's like, I know that I'm not the only guy who thinks Joe Morello is one of the greatest drummers who ever lived. So, he's just amazing. Dire Straits was highly underrated. It was an interesting band. But to be honest with you, I like a lot of Knopfler solo stuff more. So hard to tell, you know. Yeah. I don't know. I can sit here and talk about this stuff all night long. But I've been listening to a lot. I've been listening to a lot of. I mean, I went through an entire phase where I listened to nothing like Irish music for like 5 years. So, you know, as I get older, I find myself wanting to listen to more of the stuff that I got introduced to by my dad, like big band and traditional country and shit that my dad used to listen to, and not the Fleetwood Mac and all that other crap, because I still don't like that stuff. There's not much from the late 60s, early 70s that I really like. I'm not a big, huge fan of that, right? So, mad respect for Elvis Costello. Man could play anything and well. Not a huge Elvis Costello fan, but not because of any particular thing. I never spent the time to learn one way or the other. By the way, Donna from NC, I did not miss Neil Peart. I did not miss the Neil Peart comment, because Neil is one of those people that is an inspiration as an artist, as to why if one is going to become a musician, is going to become anything in your life, you do it, and you do it to the utmost of your ability. And that was Neil. And it's why Bill Bruford too. Bruford is my musical hero, because Bill Bruford would never sit still. He was always pushing himself, the envelope, whatever he was working in, the band he was working in, or anything else. And when he no longer had anything else to say, he stopped. And if you're interested in that era of music, and you're interested in the history of Yes and King Crimson and the other side of the music industry, read his autobiography. It's 420 pages of an apologia as to why he's going to retire. And it's one of the saddest books I've ever read. Yeah, North on 60. I'm with you on a lot of that, though. I can't take rap. I'm just way too I guess I'm way too white for that. I can't take rap. It doesn't or hip hop. None of that stuff makes any sense to me whatsoever. It just doesn't. And I'll just be honest about it. A lot of great Henry Mancini. I don't actively listen to it, but there's a lot of great music. I play the Pink Panther theme on the bass. It's one of my after I've warmed up and I've done my thing for the day, it's like then to play the Pink Panther theme properly with all the inflection and with no mistakes. It doesn't sound like much, but it's really hard. So there you go. That is Henry Mancini, right? Not Lalo Schifrin. Yeah. Rap for proper musicians, AC/DC. I like AC/DC. Learning how to play some of those AC/DC classics on the guitar. Oh my God, dude. Angus is brilliant. I mean, it's still the same 5 chords over and over again, but damn. Shit's hard because of the syncopation, because of the time. They're rock solid. Their time was unbelievable. Learning love King Crimson. They're done as a. I mean, and honestly, once Bill Bruford was, I was never. I'm not really interested in King Crimson as long as if Bill Bruford's not on the liner notes. Like, so, you know, Thrack is a great album when they came back, and I finally got to see Crimson in 1995 or 96 when they toured for Thrack, the double trio set with Tony Levin. And so Adrian Belew, Robert Fripp, Tony Levin, Trey Gunn, Pat Mastelotto, Bill Bruford, right? The double trio setup, which was really interesting. It was really cool. And I was in a room full of musicians, and with 8 and I, you know, I had gotten everybody in my peer group, to expose to enough King Crimson, enough stuff that they like from King Crimson, be it Discipline or whatever. Most of them just like Discipline, to be honest with you. They don't listen to Beat. They don't listen to Three Perfect Pair. They don't listen to Lark's Tongues and Aspect. They don't listen to Red. I put Red on. I used to put Red on in the stereo in the car. They're like, I'm going to kill him. And so yeah, I'm sitting there, 7 of my good friends, and we're sitting there watching King Crimson play. And I remember them starting to play Thrack, and my good friend, who's also my partner today, just looked at me. And Thrack, if you don't know, half the band plays in 5, the other half plays in 7. And they just make any random noise. That's the song, right? That's the head on that song is do whatever you want on the downbeats in 5, do whatever you want in the downbeats on 7. So one's playing bam, bam, and one's playing bam, 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 and they're bam, 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 and they're playing whatever the hell they want. And there's no chord structure, there's no nothing. It's just make a jazz noise here. And when they start to play Thrack, my good friend turns to me and he just looks up, and he's a musician, so I mean he gets it. He's a jazz musician, like he's a jazz musician. And he's like, "What the fuck is that?" With the biggest smile on his face I'd ever seen. And in the 20 at that point, these are the 20 years I'd known him, and he was like, or 15 years I'd known him. Like he's like, yeah. And then they go into Lark's Tongues and Aspect Part 2, and I start to lose my mind. He's like, "What the fuck are you talking? What the fuck is this?" I'm like, "You're just neophyte. Move on." Thunderstruck is a great song, yeah. And yeah, anything after 1983, I don't listen to anything. I mean, I listen to the classic stuff. Those Dirty Deeds and Back in Black, and I'm sure there's a couple of other albums that matter. Highway to Hell. I mean, I've listened to all that stuff. The Bon Scott stuff is great. Me? Are you asking, have I ever replaced? No, I have at this point, I have 2 guitars. They are they're both Epiphones. One's a 66 Warren 66 reissue of an Epiphone Wilshire with 2 mini humbuckers and kind of hot thinly wired mini humbuckers, and the other one is a 339 with P90s. So I'm I got my single coil set up. I've got my humbucker set up, and then for the bass, right now I've got a Squier P bass, which is not bad. I'm gonna probably pick up either I'm gonna look really seriously though, because my hands are not very big, and I can't stretch like I used to. I just can't. My hands are too tight from milking goats and getting old. Ibanez just came out with a mezzo bass. So the Squier bass is a 34, kind of a classic 34-inch scale bass, and then they also make people make the Jaguar short scales are like 30-inch, and that's too short. I'm thinking seriously about the Ibanez is putting on the mezzo bass, which is a 32-inch scale with a maple fretboard, PJ setup. The only thing is it'll probably need to have the bridge replaced because the bridge is a $9 piece of shit. So gonna have to replace that. Go to Stu Mac, replace that, and be done with it. But yeah, I'm thinking about that. I'm waiting for they're just coming out, so I'm waiting for my local Guitar Center to get one so I can play it, see if I like it, and if I do, I may buy one of those for $300. Do a little work on it. Have a fret job. Have the frets. If it's really good, I'll have the frets dressed. Put a proper bridge on the thing, and I may play that. And if not, then I'll go for a Fender Active Precision PJ setup. That's about a $700 bass. I'll probably just buy one of those. The only problem with those is that they got a rosewood fretboard on them, and I really do think that a bass, I say for guitars I prefer rosewood fretboards, but for basses I do prefer the maple fretboard. Well, I mean, they're big enough. Yes, Colin Jensen. But, you know, for a bass player, I have kind of stumpy fingers. Well, the 70s were interesting because, you know, the whole system was breaking down. It was like movies back then were also very interesting. We were transitioning from one business model to a different one. I'm gonna leave in a couple minutes here because we're at the 120 minute, we're at an hour and 20 minute mark, and I'm, you know, I don't know about you guys, and I've already lost 2/3 of my audience, so you guys don't care anymore. So yeah, Big Balls is pretty good. So is Squeezebox, by the way, by The Who, right? But the reason I think that things were diverse back then was because the music industry, along with the movie industry at that point in time, was moving from one business model to another. It hadn't been corporatized yet. So they were moving from the old system to the new one, who understood then that you had to let a band nurture itself and allow, you know, different things to them to grow up. I also play normally. I play right-handed. I think that's part of the reason why things were so, you know, open back then. And then once the corporations came in and started buying all the music, the record labels, and that changed everything. And now today we're branched back out again. Now music is far more interesting because bands can literally make music in home studios in a way that they don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for the record label to cut a master for them and then go into debt up to their eyeballs. They can just cut a CD. And, you know, they can cut their first or second CD on their own. It could be even home recorded. It doesn't have to be great, but if they can tour and get a following and start to get a tour together, then they can, you know, get enough money to continue to work and then do better and better work. I listen to Gaelic Storm. I like them. They're fun. They're when I need to like turn my brain off. And you can very much see that was a band that went through that exact model. They recorded where they could with the amount of money that they had, and then over time, as they got more popular and they made more money touring, that they were able to then go in, hire proper producers. They hit a point about 10, 12 years ago where they hit a point where they could go into a studio in Nashville, hire a really great producer, some really good backing musicians to help fill out their sound because they don't have a native bass player in that band, and make it work. And you can really hear the production change, and their songwriting then changed because they were working in a different kind of environment and under a different level of, and they had a different level of they had a different business model at that point. They had more room in their schedule. So, all right. Accountants always kill creativity, right? So. All right, guys, I think this has been fun. I think I probably just killed my audience, but, you know, I don't care. Whatever. We're good. So, it's 10 o'clock. I need to go to bed. I got a long day tomorrow. You guys take care. You be good. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.